Welcome, guys, to How the Frack We Got Here, a show that takes the news and events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. I'm your host, the most Will Buchanan, and on this show, we simply are all about the facts. There are plenty of news stations out there that simply want to do anything short but inform you. Here at How the Frack We Got Here, that's all we believe in. We go up to the left, we go up to the right, we go up to the middle of independence, we go after all sides because there's more than one side of a story to everything. And you need to know it all in order to actually formulate your own opinion. And that's what we try to do here at How the Frack We Got Here. Thanks for listening, and hold on. It's going to be fun.
Hey, everybody. Today's date, May the 8th, 2024, and this is How the Frack We Got Here. I'm host the most Will Buchanan. How the Frack We Got Here. We do take the events of the week and try to make sense out of it all. Before we get started, yes, my son who decided that nap time wasn't going to happen is with me. But we are a news podcast, guys, which means that we do try to find the most reputable news from the best sources for investigative journalism. We do not do sensational news like Fox News or Newsmax or The Blaze or your extreme left or extreme right. We give you the facts and just the facts and nothing but the facts. At the same time, guys, we do try to watch our language on the show. I know, we do try, Obi. But sometimes words do fly. At the same time, there may be things that might be shown that might be too intense for younger viewers. So viewer discretion is advised aside from that. Welcome. So, I guess there's no way to start this because every time I want to bring up the college protests, they just seem to get worse. And I do mean worse.
Putting protesters under arrest. New clashes today between police and demonstrators on college campuses. Here in D.C., police pepper spraying protesters, breaking up an encampment there at George Washington University. At least 33 people arrested. Then in New York City, police were breaking up an encampment at the Fashion Institute of Technology. Roughly 50 people there were arrested. Our Phil Lipoff has been following all the latest developments. Phil, let's go ahead and start with the situation at GW. Protesters had been camped out there for 2 weeks. What made police finally move in?
Well, warning after warning after warning. And right off the bat here, we should mention that the protesters at GW and other places still at this hour know what's going to happen eventually. The police are going to move in. And in D.C., they did to clear out that encampment. It had been there, as I mentioned, for more than a week. There was a skirmish, as you see. You mentioned 33 people were arrested. I will say what's interesting about this particular incident is that it happened just hours before Washington Mayor Muriel Bowser and her police chief were scheduled to testify in front of a congressional committee investigating the response to that encampment over the past week or so. I mean, this happened in the early morning hours, and that committee was scheduled to have a hearing today. When Oversight Chair James Comer, a Republican from Kentucky, heard about the police action and clearing of the encampment, he announced that the hearing was canceled. We don't need to have it anymore, and he took credit for the action.
It's interesting, Phil, just coming across the wire here that during a press conference with D.C. police, they were explaining that they shut down George Washington University's encampment at 3 a.m., saying that protesters from Columbia University actually showed up and infiltrated these protests. It's interesting to kind of see as things slow down there in New York, there are still those that were involved with these protests kind of moving into other areas.
And it's not really surprising because when we talked to some of these protesters at Columbia specifically, they said, we're not going to stop until there is a ceasefire. So, they didn't tell us they were going to show up in other places, but it doesn't surprise me for sure.
Well, you've gone across country following all the other encampments and protests. What do we know?
Well, in terms of outside agitators, we should touch on that. Everywhere we've gone and covered this across the country, there's been this talk about outside agitators. We've seen more than 2,500 arrests across the country. It could even be more now at more than 40 campuses. The percentage of people arrested is different from campus to campus. At Columbia, the NYPD says about 30% of those they arrested were not affiliated with that school. But at City College of New York, that number was way higher. 60% of the people arrested, police tell us, were not affiliated with that school. So who are these people? Where are they coming from? They're not always freely giving their organization, but what we do know is that there is a portion of these protests, these pro-Palestinian protests, that outside people are coming in to I don't know, police will say agitate or just be there and do whatever they do.
Phil, it's such a bummer. Some of these universities canceling commencement speeches now. I mean, for those that may not have even been involved, they don't. Yeah, a lot of these students are excited to get up on that stage, receive that diploma, and it's what they've worked so hard for.
Not just excited, but yeah, they've earned it, right? They've done these 4 years. One of my children, my oldest, is class of 2020. So we had to drive by her high school in 2020 during the pandemic for her graduation. Luckily, she's at a school that her graduation is not threatened, but she has friends who are at schools. I have a nephew who's at USC, and these kids. The bummer is a great technical term that you came up with, Kira. It is a bummer for these kids, and they've gotten used to bummer after bummer over the last 4 years with the pandemic and now this. It's sad.
I'm going back to my days in college where that was the word, bummer.
It's a good word. It's a good word.
Yes, it is.
It is a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bummer to a certain extent, except for the fact that, well, basically these kids are doing what has been done all throughout history. I mean, with the protests in the Vietnam War, the protests about invading Iraq, the protests about continuing the war in Afghanistan. However, to certain extents, it's to where now, when it comes to Israel and Palestine and Hamas, it's just that these students are speaking, and students and college professors, mind you, are really speaking out in protest and saying that we do not support this unnecessary war. But what do most people do? They send police, law enforcement, if you will, to do what? To quell them, to break up the encampments, to pretty much try to get life under control. At the same time, there's nothing to get under control. This is the reason why protests exist. Protests exist because they make you uncomfortable, but they get your attention. At the same time, it's a little hard not to ignore the fact that these protests are increasing in number. And yes, I know with college and high school, graduations are happening. And again, congratulations to all those that are graduating in the year 2024. Definitely kudos to you. But yes, does it get overshadowed by protests? Absolutely. But for good reason. Because again, we're sitting there backing Israel against their really unjustified attacks. And at the same time, Biden is hoping for a ceasefire while Netanyahu, the Israel welfare queen that he is, wants to push forward into Rafah. And again, this is the reason why protests happen. At the same time, they should continue to happen until something is done. Because again, if we leave it up, if we simply get mad about a protest instead of actually listening to what others have to say, then history repeats itself. So, with that being said, I did want to move on because in the world of Georgia, whenever it comes to Fani Willis and her DA status, it seems that Trump and his lawyers, which I'm still surprised he's still able to pay them because, well, his flock pays his lawyer bills. And now the RNC pays his lawyer bills. But at the same time, they actually did get an appeal on the DA that's investigating for election fraud. The appeal case has just been reopened. And yeah, I can't make this up.
Some breaking news. The Georgia Appeals Court has now agreed to take up the Trump team's appeal of the Fani Willis disqualification ruling. Now, lower court had already ruled that Willis can remain on that case. So what happens there now?
So the Trump team wants to appeal the decision. They would like Fani Willis kicked off the case entirely. The judge has ruled that Fani Willis could stay as long as her former paramour, Nathan Wade, was removed from the case to avoid even the appearance of any kind of a conflict. So he's off the case. Fani Willis is on. The appellate court has agreed to take up the matter. They haven't, agreed to any decision, but they've at least agreed to take it up, which is yet one more delay for a case that still does not have a date to start trial.
So, Con, what does this do, these delays do, given we're 6 months away from the election now?
I think, Diane, that's a great question. And ultimately what it does is it guarantees that the only case that's going to trial out of these three criminal cases, the documents case, the Fani Willis case, January 6th case, is ultimately the case that's now before the judge and jury in New York State.
And Aaron, looking back at the criminal hush money trial now, Stormy Daniels was one of the key witnesses in this case, right? Her and Michael Cohen are arguably the two big names that we're looking to hear from. So now that she has had this testimony, what do you expect to happen next?
So we got to stop it right there because it pretty much goes into the current court case that Trump is actually in, which is kind of the smallest of the court cases, which is basically his election fraud and his money of paying a former mattress actress. So not really surprised by that. Going back in simple fact of the matter that a lot of people are going, why are we going back into this? Well, because again, Trump does not want Fannie Willis to basically prosecute him. Because if you guys don't remember, just a few months ago, this whole big uproar about her prosecutor she brought on that she had a relationship with. Then others, including Fox News, try to make it seem like Fannie Willis was using state funds to fund trips and pay him and things of that nature. And we all remember the infamous testimony that Fannie Willis did from the witness stand and dissecting the Trump prosecutors at the time, to the point to where even the judge had to sit there and say, you guys need to go back and figure out your case. It's almost as if they have to turn around and give the Trump prosecutors all the chances in the world to really figure out what is the obvious. Fannie Willis is not going away anytime soon. She literally won her case to remain on the trial. And it was a little unfair that, yes, that the prosecutor for her side had to go, because the judge pretty much sat there and said, well, we can't prove the simple fact of the matter that you guys did have an impromptu relationship. But at the same time, one of you have to go, in which her prosecutor did actually leave. So why are we appealing? We're appealing because, again, because Trump and his team are figuring out what these court cases keeping up. And I keep saying this because he's all but racked up the Republican nominations. So what's going on with these court cases is that his lawyers, again, are trying to figure out every stall tactic they can think of to push these court cases back. Now, in one instance, which we're about to cover very soon, they were successful in doing just that, and it was one of the bigger cases. But in the sense of Fannie Willis, which her and her team are ready to go and to prosecute Trump, Trump is doing his best because the federal election, again, a major federal case, which, if he's convicted, disqualifies him from the presidency, is the whole entire reason why this case is being pushed back, while the run to the letter with his hush money payments going to his campaign is moving forward because they think they can win. And so it doesn't defeat the fact of, well, the evidence that he has against him is overwhelming, and Willis and her team are ready to prove it. But Trump's team is ready to delay it as much as possible. Why? Because they feel like if he gets the nomination and he's running for the election, he can't be prosecuted. Which, again, he can be prosecuted. There is no rhetoric, there is no law, there is nothing out there that says a person running for office cannot still be tried in court and indicted. Running for presidency does not absolve you of that. However, the fear of it all is if he somehow does win the presidency and he somehow is back in power, he could have those cases dismissed, which is what the end goal would be for him anyway. But again, Fannie Willis has to go this whole rigmarole because, simply put, it is a delay stall tactic. That is all it is. But speaking of stall tactics, guys, Marjorie Taylor Greene decided that, well, if I'm going to keep down on this hill to get the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, to listen, I'm going to bring it up to a vote. And I cannot believe this. She actually did go forward with this. But let me give you the before we get to the after.
Well, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for this conversation. Speaker Mike Johnson and Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene meeting for 90 minutes today. You know, Greene continues to make that threat that she wants to oust Johnson from his speakership.
And one vote can do it, and the House can make that proposal. At today's meeting, Congresswoman Greene, issued her list of demands that Speaker of the House Johnson must meet her demands in order to vote on her motion to vacate. That is what they call this effort to oust the Speaker.
These are not unreasonable requests. These are the right things to do. These are the right things to do for our conference. And our Republican Speaker, who ran through the Democrat agenda, should be able to get it done.
All right, Jay O'Brien's on Capitol Hill following all the latest developments, as he does. So, Jay, Speaker Mike Johnson, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, they had their second meeting today. Tell us about what's going on there.
Well, they met yesterday for about 2 hours. Today they met for 90 minutes, and they're no closer to any kind of agreement, although Congresswoman Green said the meeting was productive. But she also looks no closer, guys, to calling for an actual vote on whether or not Mike Johnson should be ousted as Speaker. She promised to call a vote this week, but now they're in these ongoing talks, which frankly weren't expected to really come about this week. And now it's unclear if there's ever going to be a vote on Johnson's future.
So Green has issued her list of demands for Johnson. What are they? And is he even listening to her?
Well, she's got 4 demands. One is to return to something called the Hastert rule, which means a majority of the majority has to support every piece of legislation. A majority of Republicans. She also wants no more funding for Ukraine to come out of this Congress. She wants severe spending cuts when government funding expires in September. And she wants to defund the special counsel Jack Smith that's prosecuting former President Trump. So those demands, though, guys, they are somewhat new. She only released that list of demands publicly today, and she's been working for months, she says, to try to oust Mike Johnson. I think it's important to remember the timeline. Forgive me, bear with me, because it is long, but it's important. She started this effort in late March of this year after Johnson partnered with Democrats to pass government funding. She files this motion to vacate Johnson, but she doesn't call for a vote to oust him. She instead holds that possibility of a vote over his head. And then FISA comes up, that Foreign Warrantless Surveillance Act. It comes up for reauthorization. Green opposes that. Reauthorizing that passes, but Green still doesn't call a vote to oust Johnson. She still holds that vote over his head. Then Ukraine aid passes. Green opposes that, but she still doesn't call a vote. Instead, she says she's going to let the House go out on vacation, and when everybody comes back, she might call a vote then. Then they all come back, and she still doesn't call a vote. She then holds a press conference. This is last week, in which she said she's going to call a vote this week on Johnson's future, and she still looks no closer, guys, to calling that vote this week.
Yeah, it sounds like the Congresswoman cried wolf a little bit. And it's one thing to play whack-a-speaker when it's not an election year, like she did, in the other. But this is an election year. ABC News can confirm that Donald Trump does not want her to do this and has been in contact with her. So that may be the reason for putting on the brakes there. Jay O'Brien.
Well, let's think about this for a second, guys. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a woman who got elected for spouting QAnon, a woman that couldn't get along with her fellow politicians, a woman that literally had her entire public marriage drawn out to the world to see, who got paid for doing nothing, wants to threaten the Speaker of the House because, well, he's doing his job. Keep in mind, this is the same thing that she did with former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, saying, well, he worked with the Democrats. Yes, that's what the House Speaker has to do. You do have to work with Democrats. Unfortunately, that is the result. That is the job that you have. But look at the demands that she had. They want to cut spending once government funding runs out. Typical Republican rhetoric. She also wants to defund Jack, the special counsel, which again Trump did ask for in his case. But again, she wants that defunded. And then on top of that, she says no more money to Ukraine. All Republican talking points. And also, like I said, that's the before. Here's the after. Shortly a couple of hours earlier today, she did bring up her vote. She did bring up a measure to vote for the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, to be removed. It was immediately shot down to a bunch of boos. Why? Because the Democratic Party stepped in to actually vote to keep the man, along with several Republicans, to keep Johnson in his position, which basically made Marjorie Taylor Greene look like an idiot, which is not that hard to do. But this is the Republican Congress that they wanted. This 118th Congress, again, has done nothing. Again, I keep pointing this out because for all those conservatives out there, name me one thing this Congress has done that has actually improved the American people, because honestly, they haven't. And even more so, you basically still have the Republican Party still trying to oust the very same person they nominated him because the person before him was doing the exact same thing. So again, craziness when it comes to Congress, especially on the conservative side. But keep in mind, guys, like I talked about earlier, where I said Trump successfully got probably one of the biggest cases, which he's dealing with, because, I mean, he's under 91 federal indictments. But the case regarding the classified documents, the ones that he basically dealt with the FBI, when he basically sat there and said that, yes, I can declassify this, that he sat there and said that as president, he can do this. and we come to find out that that was BS, somehow, some way, the judge just now postponed the case, or I should say the trial. Again, it's almost as if, and if you're wondering, the judge that's actually over this is a Trump nominated judge. We shouldn't be surprised.
Paula Reed, as well as former Trump White House attorney Jim Schultz. So, Paula, a significant shift, certainly playing into Trump's strategy of delay. But also, we should note, Special Counsel Jack Smith really has voiced some serious concerns, if not animus, toward this judge.
Yeah, absolutely. And there may come a time when he tries to get her removed from the case. But at this point, that's premature. What Jack Smith knows tonight, though, is that it's very possible that he may not be able to bring either one of his federal cases against former President Trump before the election. And the election is a significant point on the calendar, because if Trump is reelected, he can have Jack Smith and both of his cases dismissed. Now, here, this case, the classified documents case, postponed indefinitely. But the other prosecution that Smith has brought, the January 6th case, also on ice while the Supreme Court contemplates if Trump has presidential immunity. Now, in the arguments a couple weeks ago, they signaled that they're not likely to toss that case out, but they might toss it back down to the trial court for more litigation, which, again, that's why it would make it impossible to bring before the November election. Obviously, we're here in Manhattan for this criminal case. The other one outstanding is the RICO case down in Georgia. But again, it goes back to the strategy of delay. By trying to have Fani Willis and Nathan Wade removed from the case, they successfully likely pushed that until late in this year. And it's very difficult, again, if Trump is reelected, to put him on trial down there. So this long game that they've been playing to try to delay everything overall has been successful. The one case that is going forward is what was always considered kind of the runt of the litter, the least consequential of the four. But it is still a historic case. The first prosecution.
And that's the point. That's the part right there that really makes no sense. You're telling me that outside of a federal case, like I talked about, the one with the election, the one regarding his classified documents, both of those, which again could disqualify him if he's indicted, either one of them, have now been pushed back. And I keep asking, people are going to be asking this question: why is it that whenever it comes to Trump, he's so lucky? He seems to get his court dates pushed back, appeals in the 11th hour come out. And I have been telling folks, and I'll keep saying this is why I sit there and say voting is important. This is why I sit there and say who you vote is important. Because keep in mind, when Trump did have his presidential run, he installed multiple judges outside of overrunning the Supreme Court. Those very same judges, albeit some of them may actually be doing their job, but some of them may be towing the company line. And the one case that's over those classified documents is being looked at by a Trump-appointed judge. And I'm sorry, that is favoritism being shown, and it is beyond obvious. Because as the reporter said, if Trump were to come back once he's in power, he could dismiss the whole thing as president. And that alone should be a reason that this case should be made priority, regardless if Trump is running or not, because again, he's been indicted. But also, here's the crazy part for all those that don't know, because again, he's still looking for a VP, and America's favorite Uncle Tom, Tim Scott, is basically doing the Charleston shuffle to make sure that he can be a pick me for Trump. Even more so, where again, the question of the election, if the election is done properly and without fraud, would you validate if you won or lost? Would you validate it? Would you validate the results? And of course, Tim Scott, again, loves to shuffle and sambo.
He said that he won Wisconsin falsely, Senator. So again, to the point, you voted to certify the election results of 2020. It's the exact opposite of what you said and did after 2020. Why would you want to be on a ticket with someone where there's such a fundamental difference?
There is clear facts here. President Trump himself said he expects this election to be fair, he expects it to be honest, and he expects to win. That's what the presidential candidate should expect, and I expect the exact same thing. And frankly, the American people agree with him. This is an issue that is not an issue, so I'm not going to make it an issue.
Well, Senator, will you commit to accepting the election results of 2024? Bottom line.
At the end of the day, the 47th president of the United States will be President Donald Trump. And I'm excited to get back to low inflation, low unemployment.
Wait, Senator, yes or no? Yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024 no matter who wins?
That is my statement.
But is it just yes or no? Will you accept the election results of 2024?
I look forward to President Trump being the 47th president. Kristen, you could ask him multiple times.
Senator, just a yes or no answer.
So the American people will make the decision.
But I don't hear you committing
for President Trump. That's clear.
I don't hear you committing to the election results.
Here's the challenge.
Will you commit to accepting the election results?
This is why so many Americans believe that NBC is an extension of the Democrat Party. At the end of the day, I've said what I've said, and I know that the American people, their voices will be heard, and I believe that President Trump will be our next president. It's that simple.
But Senator, as you know, the hallmark of our democracy is that both candidates agree to a peaceful transfer of power. So I'm asking you as a potential VP nominee, will you accept to commit to the election results in this election cycle, no matter who wins? Just simply yes or no.
I expect President Trump to win the next election. Listen, I'm not going to answer your hypothetical question when, in fact, I believe the American people are speaking today on the results of the election. And if it continues for the next 6 months, we find ourselves in a great position where we get back to another century of American prosperity.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me translate what he said. Oh, I don't want to disrespect Massa. Massa might get me out the field house. Massa might get me in the White House. I just got to repeat what he says because I can't listen to you, lady. I'm going to be the VP for the white man for Trump no matter what. And that's what he sounds like. He sounds like a Sambo slinging idiot. I'm sorry. Yes, I call him a raccoon. He's also a raccoon at this point because it's a simple question. It's a simple question because history does not allow us to forget that for the simple fact of the matter, there's only one group of people, there was only one party out there that was crying about, not having a fair election. Because Trump actually, because here's the funny part. Let's do a little trip down memory lane, shall we? When Trump was president and everything was going to crap, and the next presidential election was coming up, and of course Biden was running, what was Trump doing the entire time? Oh, this election, it's going to be rigged. It's going to be rigged. They don't want me in power no more. They want me out. The Democrats, they're going to do everything they can. Hollywood, they're going to do everything they can. Because you know why? Because I'm winning. I win. I'm a winner. That's exactly what he was doing. Already muddying the waters, saying that the election was going to be unfair and biased against him, where in fact it was the most secure election in modern history. That there was no voter fraud that was accounted for. And the minor fraud that was actually found, and I say minor because it involved one or two individuals, was on the Republican side of voting. And so Trump is going to sit there and say again, I'm going to run and they're going to try to do this against me. Because here's the thing, guys, for all those that are conservatives, Trump is not running for you. He's running for himself. He's running to save himself. Because the only way he can save himself is by being president again. Because all his cases, all his indictments, everything that's going on with him goes away for a little while. It doesn't disappear. It just goes away as he's president. And that's the messed up part. But you have VPs out there. I mean, all the VPs, not just Tim Scott, Marco Rubio, Nikki Haley. That's not her real name. They're all trying to make sure that they're trying to get in the spot of VP. And again, Tim Scott's no different. So it's not surprising for the sole fact of the matter, guys, that he's not going to answer the question properly. He's going to sit there and say, you know what? Mom was asleep. But for Tim Scott, guys, he is going to sit there and say exactly what he wants to say to keep himself grounded. That is the truth. And at the same time, if you expect him to say anything differently, well, you're kind of wishing on a star. And that star is already grounded. But speaking of things that are already grounded, guys, although TikTok itself may still be under a divestment, TikTok is doing exactly what we thought what they would do: sue the U.S. government.
That could ban the app nationwide. The social media company claims the law is unconstitutional and violates Americans' rights to free speech. ABC's Rachel Scott and Alexis Christoforous has more on that. Rachel, this new law forces TikTok's Chinese parent company to either sell the platform or face a total ban in the U.S. So on what grounds are they now suing the federal government?
Yeah, look, TikTok and its parent company, ByteDance, are making it clear that they will be taking on the federal government. And they outline in this lawsuit that not only are they not willing to try and find a new parent company for TikTok, that they simply just will not do so. So one of the major arguments that TikTok outlines in this lawsuit is that a possible ban infringes on the rights of 170 million Americans who use the app right here in the United States. TikTok also argues that the Chinese parent company ByteDance cannot get permission from the Chinese government necessarily to sell a certain feature of the app that powers TikTok here in the United States. They also make the case here that it would take years to find a whole new set of engineers to sort of power the platform here in the United States. And so ultimately, it would lead to a shutdown of TikTok by the end of January of next year. And so they are taking on the federal government, and they say that they will challenge this all the way through the courts.
Alexis, we've heard potential buyers are lining up to buy TikTok. So what's the parent company ByteDance saying about a possible sale? Are they open to it?
They have made very clear they are not going to sell this company, and they actually say it's not feasible. To Rachel's point, they're saying they would have to transfer millions of lines of source code, which is the life's blood of TikTok, to the U.S. Then engineers here would have to come up to speed with that source code or that algorithm that makes the company so valuable. They say that could take years to have happen. And what a lot of people might not realize is ByteDance actually owns many different companies, and TikTok is just one of them. It does not mean a lot in terms of revenue to ByteDance. So in many ways, the company would rather see it be shut down and banned in the U.S. than actually sell it to an American-based company.
So what does this mean for users then?
Well, we don't know until January 19th. People are lining up, as you said, to try and buy it, including deep-pocketed companies like Microsoft and Oracle.
We had Kevin O'Leary on this show talking about how he wants to buy it.
Yeah, come together with other rich folks, have a consortium of people buy this company. You're looking at it possibly being worth $100 billion with the algorithm. If they were to sell it without that algorithm, some are saying it could be $30 or $40 billion. Remember, 6 out of every 10 Americans under the age of 30 uses TikTok. This is a very valuable company.
So, Rachel, how are lawmakers responding to the lawsuit?
Well, for the most part, lawmakers are pretty united on this. You had this bipartisan bill that was passed in both the House and the Senate. It made its way to the president's desk, and he ultimately signed it. And they warn of the national security risks here. They say that by using TikTok, that the Chinese parent company ByteDance and even the Chinese government could then have access to your browsing history, even your location, as well as your data. Now, TikTok does deny those allegations. One thing that is also notable in this lawsuit, TikTok points out that even though the president signed that bill that could lead to a possible ban on TikTok here in the United States, the Biden campaign has a TikTok and has continued to use TikTok even after the president signed that bill into law. And so they argue the use of TikTok by the president's own campaign for 2024 and even other members of Congress completely undermines their arguments that this is somehow a national security threat, that they're putting Americans' data and privacy at risk. This is something I asked the vice president about just a couple of weeks ago when I interviewed her, and she said that they don't want a ban. At this point, they are worried, obviously, about the parent company of TikTok, but they're not going to comment on ongoing litigation.
So it's amazing that they sit there and say, number one, that TikTok is still a threat to national security. How so? Because TikTok has basically took over exactly what we need to be, a actually unregulated government, actually not a government-controlled app like Meta or Instagram or Facebook, to where, you're able to do things. People have made TikToks. People have made TikTok shops and businesses off TikTok. So I love the fact they sit there and say, well, it's a matter of national security. How so? Just because you no longer can control it? At the same time, I love how they say, well, the Biden campaign, the Biden administration doesn't want TikTok to go away because they still have a TikTok and they're using it. Okay, so why did a majority of Democrats and Republicans both vote to put a divestment on TikTok? Because again, you're basically saying, hey, in order for to operate in the U.S., you need to be owned by U.S. people. Which again, investors are all lining up to purchase TikTok. But I'll give ByteDance credit. We're not selling for what? And of course, them suing is a great counterstrike, because again, what is the reason why the government wants TikTok so badly? Because again, listen to what they said. Well, the Chinese government could possibly have your information down to your location and all your metadata. Doesn't the US government already have that? And even so, again, it always goes back to that old saying, well, you don't want to do that. The government hates competition. So again, I'm really not surprised by this, guys, but I do love the fact that ByteDance is simply not going away. But we will definitely follow that story as it goes along. Another story that we're following is the Boy Scouts of America is going through a rebranding. I'm pretty sure it has nothing with the decades of sexual abuse that have happened to young Scouters. Hey.
Scouts of America trying to rebrand itself, changing its name for the first time in its 114-year history. It's now going to be known as Scouting America. That's starting next February on the organization's 115th anniversary. The group says the change reflects the continuing efforts to make the program inclusive for everyone. And this is a big change that comes after some big issues for the organization, as it spends hundreds of millions of dollars to compensate thousands of men who say they were sexually abused as children in this program. Maura Barrett is following this one for us and joins us now. So Maura, over the last few years, we've really seen this push by the Boy Scouts to try to make the organization more inclusive. And it's pretty different now from how this organization started.
Yeah, absolutely, Aaron. I mean, it's more than 100 years old, and it's an organization that's known to hold firm on to tradition. And so change is naturally difficult, but they've made these changes over the last decade, especially in light of the turmoil that they faced. But back in 2013, they made the decision to start including gay scouts. Then shortly after that, 2 years later, they ended its blanket ban on gay adult leaders as well. Then in 2017, they allowed trans children who identified as boys to enroll in just boys-only programs. But then the same year, they also announced that girls would be welcome into the program. Now, this was different than the Girl Scouts organization, which also caused some confusion and controversy in that sense. But they were trying to be more inclusive when it comes to the Boy Scouts specifically. And then throughout 2018 and 2019, there was more inclusivity actions to include girls going forward, again, in that Boy Scouts umbrella. And so the president said today, this was announced at their annual conference, the president said that though our name will be new, our mission remains unchanged. We are committed to teaching young people to be prepared for life. And now the name change will officially take effect starting next year in February. But the president said that they anticipate organizations, groups to start identifying with the new name as soon as in the next couple of months, Aaron.
Yeah, at the same time, Maura, there's been all this turmoil in the last few years for this organization, right? We had the bankruptcy there, settling these claims of sexual abuse within the programs. Where does all that stand?
Well, if you think back to it, when all of this was unfolding, it also was timed out along with the pandemic. And so the pandemic really hit this organization hard to start. They lost about 1 million members during that time. They sit at about 1 million members right now. Their peak was at 5 million, just to give you some context there. Understandably, it was hard to participate in these organization groups during the pandemic, but then they were also hit with these allegations, lawsuits of sexual abuse. And in 2020, at the same time, they filed for bankruptcy protection because of these nearly 300 lawsuits and sex abuse claims. And then they reached a settlement, an $850 million settlement with thousands of men who said that they were abused as children in 2021. And then just last year, a judge upheld this $2.4 billion bankruptcy plan. And basically what that means is it gives the Boy Scout group, the organization, the ability to operate while they're paying compensation to these men who allege that they faced sexual abuse when they were children. And so all of this is still unfolding behind the scenes as the organization works to push forward and rebrand it.
So really and truly, it is great that, Boy Scouts are including girls in Club Scouts because, it's the nature of what we live in. It's pretty much our society. But it does make me wonder, if it wasn't for the years of sexual abuse cases that come up, the $850 million settlement that they have to do, would they be rebranding? Because again, that's usually the day giveaway when something is going terribly wrong in a company. We immediately have to rebrand. So that way you're not going to remember all the crappy stuff we did beforehand. But again, not knocking it. The fact it's going to be called Scouts of America. I just hope they learn from the Girl Scouts and actually stop selling popcorn and get on cookies or something, because let's be honest, Girl Scouts are cleaning up when it's cookie time, which reminds me, I need to make sure the next time, because those coffee and Sandy's cookies are just awesome. Forget them mints. But anyway, I digress. A couple more stories. Last story, guys, before we get to our feel good segment. Again, I talked about what these Republicans are doing with workforces, guys. I've sat there and said the entire time we need to watch out, because what the Republican Party is doing is they are basically slowly, if not progressively, trying to make child labor laws a little bit more looser. I talked about this janitorial service last year employing minors and getting caught. And it's the same group, Fayette Janitorial Services, did have a settlement that they would pay almost $650,000 in civil penalties for hiring underage children at meat processing plants. I keep saying this. They are, because of the fact of the workforce and because of how everything is happening, the Republicans, instead of, trying to actually help workers get more pay, get more benefits, get more the things that all these other countries are enjoying, that we ourselves asked for in this country. Republicans sat there and said, well, we're not going to give you that, but we'll make it easier for a child to work, for a teenager to work longer hours, because, well, businesses need workers. And let's be honest, GOP is going to listen to who's ever fatting their pockets, which are businesses. These same businesses are employing minors, some of them undocumented, to clean up, to do adult jobs. And even more so, some of these kids are getting hurt or worse. At the same time, these businesses aren't getting penalized. Not in the same sense that, Rick DeSantis would actually penalize Florida companies for hiring undocumented workers. But again, this is a strict warning, which I hope will lead to a trend, but I doubt it will, because these are the same people that will employ underage workers, simply put, because they're not going to change their wages, but they need people. And that alone will tell you about this economy that we're living in right now, that if you simply paid more for workers, this economy would turn around in a heartbeat, because you based this economy around consumer spending. And if consumers aren't spending, the economy will tank, inflation will rise, mainly because companies have sat there and really short-stocked their inventory and raised their prices, because they still, in an inflation economy, companies are still turning record profits, which tells you it's not inflation, it's freaking greed. But we're going to go ahead and move on to our feel good segment, guys, because usually on How the Frack We Got Here, we usually cover a lot of things that are doom and gloom. Sometimes we use your faith in humanity, but hey, it's Wednesday. Tomorrow's Friday Eve, which is Thursday. We will leave you guys out some good vibrations, and hopefully this next story will do that, because I did want to cover the WNBA, because Angel Reese and Chicago Sky, unfortunately, their first game was not televised, because every other sports network seemed to be tuned in on Caitlin Clark and the Internet Fever, which again was pointed out by several people that, all these games shouldn't focus around just one player. Caitlin Clark is not Michael Jordan. That being said, we want to do something like everybody else has done and show highlights of the Angel Reese game, because also, spoiler alert, they did actually wind up beating New York.
Evans in the corner, long. Angel Reese right there for the rebound and the bucket.
That's what the people came to see, Jason.
Let's see. Let's look at this one.
I mean, she's in great position right here, a great screen and roll to the rim. But what she does is she just catches Jonquel Jones off guard and beats her to.
Davis decision-making, lost it though. Now Reese has a 2-on-1 with Allen. Double clutch from Lindsay Allen. How about that?
That's just one. You don't see this a lot. It's a great defensive play by Kennedy Carter. And then your 6'3" rookie, Angel Reese, is leading the break. And who's on the receiving?
Player growing up with Candace Parker, who Sky fans know can do it all. Meanwhile, looks like it's going to be Angel going to work here in the lane. How about that?
That passion. Call it swag anymore, so we've got to come up with a new name for it, but just her ability to finish through contact and then just give the people what they want. That personality.
Pop. Battle for the rebound. Angel Reese there. Her second offensive board of the game, and at least another bucket.
And that's what she does. Sky fans better get familiar with this because this is what Angel Reese does. She can generate her own offense with her ability to pursue rebounds out of space.
Number 2 for the Chicago Sky. Angel Reese had a really good first half in her first game in front of the home fans here in Chi-Town. People came to watch her play, and she put on a good show in the opening half as well.
I've just been so incredibly impressed with Angel Reese. We knew that she was going to play hard. We knew that she was going to get on the glass and score off offensive rebounds. But just her savviness, her presence, her ability to finish through contact like we saw right there, and just really playing to the crowd, Jason. This rookie is far and beyond where I thought that she would be at this.
And we got to cut there because, again, one to definitely give her flowers because, you know, with all the NBA people, with all the WNBA, they definitely use press. So, again, to help the WNBA guys, please watch the games, buy jerseys and things of that nature if you're able to, because there are a lot of talented players that are currently playing in that league, not just one Caitlin Clark. So, that being said, guys, we are going to go ahead and wrap this up. I do thank you all who are watching for liking this, for letting people know this is live. I certainly appreciate that. Some shameless plugging before we do get out of here, guys. I do also want to shout out blurredstation.com. Definitely check out blurredstation.com, blurredstation.com, guys. I have sat there and said, this is the vehicle to where we can actually take our content, own our content, and be able to display it for the world to see. Blur Station is it for comics, for movies, for television shows, for things of that nature. You can definitely do it there. And you can join. Yeah, you can, Obi. And you can also join there, guys, for $10.99 a month. Simply select the Blur Station Affinity membership. Any Affinity member there would certainly appreciate it. And $10.99 a month. You cannot beat that with a stick. And of course, if you also want to have your content shown on Blur Station, you do need to join first. But once you join, you'll be able to get in contact with our Blur Station people and hopefully have your content put there. At the same time, you still get to own your content. Let's just have to work out a little bit of a distribution fee, which actually is not a bad deal. And after 10 months of paying after 36 months of paying $10.99 a month, you do have the ability yourselves to own a piece of BlurStation.com. Also, guys, check me out, Black_Spartan615 on everywhere. I usually do reviews on everything, along with my shows, How the Frack We Got Here every Wednesday. And, of course, my video game podcast, Get Bit, every Friday. The link at the bottom, guys, I'll make that just a little bit bigger for you guys to see. If you copy and paste that link in your browser, we'll take you to my link tree that has the YouTube and Facebook groups for all of my podcasts. Like, share, subscribe, let people know, get the notifications. We simply put cannot do this without you. And second, guys, I keep saying this all the time because it has to be said. Guys, the election is coming up. Please get informed. Don't just do the national, do the local. Get to know the people that are going to be running your city, that's going to be running your state. Trust me, as a person in Tennessee, a lot of people are learning that lesson right now. So definitely get out there, vote with your heart. At the same time, if you feel yourself that you can run, there's plenty of sites out there that can show you exactly how you can run in your city and state. That being said, guys, last thing I'll say about How the Frack We Got Here, it's all about staying informed. We are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We are simply giving you all the information, allow you to make up your own mind, but we do provide a logical perspective that goes along with it as well. We do a lot of things better when we're progressive. We move forward trying to right our wrongs, like simply put, like electing our first black woman to the Federal Board of Governors, electing our first black woman to the Supreme Court, electing our first black woman as National Cybersecurity Director. All great things. Basically, guys, when we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it. That's what we keep asking ourselves. Why does everything go up by our paycheck? Why are we electing different politicians but still the same old game in Congress? And most importantly, how the frack we got here. Thank you all for watching. From me and Obi, please take care of yourselves and each other, and we'll all get through this. Peace.